afternoon, everybody. Hi, thanks for coming to Coffee and Conversation. Today we're going to be talking about elder nutrition and in particular some supplemental benefits that might be available to you. Today we have Tara Hames from the Mass Councils on Aging. Very happy to have you. She's a registered dietitian and look at this, she's going to do a little dance and all that. She's very shy. Yes, yes, yes. I watched your programming. Yes, yes, I did. I shared them with everyone. You might remember her from those during COVID. Those were great. Yes, yes. So today she's going to, her talk is called 10 Knowledge Nuggets, Nutritional Knowledge Nuggets. Is that right? All right, sounds good. All right, I'm going to hand you over to Tara. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I don't usually use a mic, so this could be interesting. And plus, I can't see. And we need some extra copies for the lovely participant who just arrived. Okay, so, oops. Oh, I almost spun around. You know what?
Get some more of this.
I need more of the first page.
Let me see what.
Whew. All right, I want to be able to see you guys. I want to be able to see you and read at the same time. I don't know if this is going to work, so I made it large print for all of us. Okay, so my name is Tara Hames. I'm with the Massachusetts Councils on Aging. I use my hands a lot. I got to work on it. The Massachusetts Councils on Aging is not a state agency. We are a trade group for all of the councils on aging and senior centers around the state. What we do is we provide education, advocacy, training, technical assistance on whatever the directors and their staff need to help your lives be a little bit better. So they're the real bosses, but we're here to help them out. Okay. Excuse me. So I am a registered dietitian, and when Jillian asked if I wanted to come to the Coffee and Conversations, I said, well, what do you want to talk about? And this is what we ended up with. So I like presenting. I like talking. I could talk all day. If I talk too loud or too fast, just give me some kind of sign and I'll chill out. I want to make this interactive, but I also have a lot of information on here that I want to share. This is one of the issues I have found as a registered dietitian. We want to tell you every single thing we know in 15 minutes. It's not going to work that way, but it's always there behind us. It's always driving us along. Before I start, any dietitians in the audience? Any nurses? All right. Any other physicians or PAs? Good to know. It's good to know my audience, right? The other day, I pronounced something incorrectly, and there was a nurse in the audience, and I knew as soon as I said it, I'm like, shoot. We got over it, though. It's fine. She says she won't do that to me. So here are the 10 things, and your sheet might look a little cryptic. You're like, what are we talking about? The first thing I want to talk about is how many of us remember what malnutrition means. The Latin mal means bad, right? The reason I'm with Massachusetts Councils on Aging is to help decrease older adult malnutrition statewide. I want to help folks eat the best that they can with the time, the energy, and the money that they have, right? So just try to think about how maybe you can move the needle a little bit. I always say I am not trying to turn everyone into a vegetarian shopping at the most expensive store in the community. I just want you to sort of assess where you're at and think about like maybe one or two tweaks that you could make to be a little bit healthier. Does that sound fair? Yeah. Okay. And since this is Coffee and Conversation, and there are coffee and cookies over there, full disclosure, I would have married Cookie Monster in the 3rd grade. Okay, so have a cookie, enjoy your cookie. I already had mine. It's all good. All right. But the issue around older adult malnutrition is that up to 1 of 2 older adults are malnourished, have some type of malnutrition. And the reason that is significant is because it can contribute to other disease states that we might have or could spur those on. It also is very very important when you are hospitalized, because folks who are malnourished when they go into the hospital have longer stays. And unfortunately, sometimes you can go into the hospital and I know we're sick, we're in pain, we've got a lot going on, and we might actually come out of the hospital malnourished as well. And that's the last thing that we want to have you go home not as well off as you were coming in, right? So this is my little soapbox. I get on it just every so often during this, and then other times we talk about fun things, and then other times it gets kind of heavy. Fair? Okay, you guys are quiet. You were chatty beforehand, but that's all right. Okay. Is anybody surprised about the statistics around older adult malnutrition? When I say malnutrition, what comes to mind?
Someone who's very thin.
Yeah, very
They look
frail, thin. Exactly. What we don't think about are folks who are maybe appropriate weight or heavier. It just means you're not well nourished. So you can be what they say over fat, but still not well nourished. We want to make sure that you're getting your protein, your healthy fats, your vitamins, your minerals, all of that. And we're going to talk about how you can do that. And you do not have to overhaul your whole diet, so don't worry about that either. Deal? Oh boy. I think everybody needs to go have a cup of coffee right now. Okay. So what do we know about nutrition? Bullet number 2, it is confusing, right? I want to apologize on behalf of the entire registered dietitian community for all of that science research that keeps coming out and is different from year to year to year. One of the things I want to do is try to make you smarter consumers as well. When you hear about the latest XYZ on the news, know that that just might be on the news because the news station picked up a press release that got faxed to the news office that highlights one study that was released at a conference that was held in that city. It does not mean that that is gospel. So sometimes they can just pick up on one piece and run with it. Definitely consider the source when nutrition information comes out. I am a registered dietitian. That is a very specific title and set of credentials than a nutritionist. We can't say nutritionist now. Whenever you're getting your nutrition information, I encourage you to get it from a registered dietitian. That's a soapbox I'm not going to get on right now, but we can later on if you have a question about it. Remember, here's a perfect example of the changing science. Remember back in the 80s? I go back to the 80s a lot in my chats, so bear with me. I think that was like my favorite decade. What did they tell us about eggs in the 80s? Bad, because cholesterol. See, you guys remember that, right? Mm-hmm. How many did they say you should have?
None, if you could, but one.
Yeah, none to 2, basically, exactly. And the reason was cholesterol. So they thought that eating cholesterol would raise your cholesterol. And then down the road, they're like, oh yeah, no, that's not it. Never mind. We get a lot of those. Never mind, my bad. It's actually that when you eat a lot of saturated fat, which are the fats that are solid at room temperature, think your butter, your bacon, eggs, once they're cooked, the saturated fat is what your body uses to make cholesterol. So if you have a lot of the saturated fat, it's going to make the cholesterol. And so it's really not eating cholesterol is going to raise your cholesterol. Make sense? All right. So now what do they say about eggs? They're fine. They're fine, right? But I know prices, that's a whole nother topic of egg prices. And that was food prices are just going so high and they're not going to come down, right? Ugh, it's terrible. Okay. All right, so it's confusing. What's another example of confusing nutrition information that you've heard? Coffee. What about it?
Sometimes it was bad for you and stuff, and then other times people said drink more coffee because it's nutrition. They come out and say it's bad again, and say it's good again.
Yep. The coffee, and so sometimes it'll be like the caffeine is bad for you, and other times it's the nutrients that are in the coffee that are good for you, and different effects that the ingredients in coffee will have on different organs or systems in your body. And then what do you always hear when they're like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. Drink it in moderation. That's right. That's like the catch-all. And that is true. Sometimes I feel like it's a cop-out, but yes, if you have coffee, if you like coffee, you can have coffee. They don't recommend you have a pot or 2 or 3 pots that I know some people do all day long. And speaking of coffee, caffeine is not a diuretic. That is a myth. I know. It's actually what happens is caffeine increases your urine production, but it doesn't like pull the water out of your cells and make you have to go to the bathroom more. It works in a different way. And I think what happens is when people are drinking a lot of coffee and then they have to go to the bathroom a lot, they're also not drinking other fluids. And so your urine is going to be more concentrated. How about that? Has everybody learned something so far? Yeah. Yes. All right. It's getting warm in here. I was starting to get nervous. Okay. All righty. So this is really kind of hard to see. Has anyone other than my nurse friend here heard of sarcopenia before? Nope. So sarcopenia is, so a lot of things happen when we age, right? Throw out some complaints or some things that you're experiencing, positive or negative, as you age. I shouldn't get all like Debbie Downer. Okay. Couple of days. Arthritis. Balance, yes. Dry skin. What was the other one? Sleeping issues.
Change of diet of wanting to eat.
Different hunger. Yep. Exactly. So all of these plus more factor into how our nutrition needs change as well as preferences and our behaviors. And sarcopenia is something that I want you to be aware of. So sarcopenia is when you don't eat enough protein and you don't eat enough calories. So there's muscle mass loss. Loss is the key word there. So around age 40, I am a few years past that. Around age 40 is when we start to lose a little bit of muscle mass every year, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And it's not enough just to eat enough protein. You have to eat enough protein and calories to make sure that your body is storing it appropriately, okay? One of the things, somebody mentioned balance. This is the part where I get so like, if there's one thing I want folks to take away from this is really focus on preventing that first step of what we call the downward spiral. I would hate to have folks fall. Because what can happen when you fall? You're going to break something. And then where do you go? The hospital. And where do you go after the hospital? Rehab. And then where do you go after rehab? Hopefully home. And she is not a plant. Absolutely. We want to make sure that you can return to your home, you can return to your community, and that even if you are not able to get around as well as you did before, we want to make sure that you still have an independent quality of life as much as you can. Excuse me. So by preventing the sarcopenia, that will help prevent some of the falls, right? So you need to eat enough protein and calories as well as do the exercise, the weight bearing, the dancing, right? One of the things I've recently learned was that when older adults get back into physical activity, one of the movements that they're most wary of, and it makes sense to me, are the lateral movements. So practice like whatever it is you want to do, going back like side to side, because that's where a lot of folks can literally get tripped up. But wow. Okay. All right. So how much protein do we need? I'm going to give you, this is my Tara's secret trick, back of the envelope. So remember I said, when we hit 40, we start to lose muscle mass, so we need to eat more protein. Take your weight and divide it in half, right? So if I weigh 150, my number is 75. So that is the minimum number of grams of protein I need to have a day. So as you get older, you need to have more protein, frankly. And part of it is because we're losing the muscle mass. Part of it is disease states. It could be because wound healing, all of those factors, we need to replenish our protein constantly. So does that seem like a lot? Yeah, it is a lot. But nobody says that when I'm like, can you eat a big bowl of ice cream? Right? They're like, oh no, that's too much. I couldn't have all of that. I always find that's like, remember 5 a day with the fruits and vegetables? We're like, how am I going to get all those servings? Never a problem when we were talking about Snickers bars. Right? No offense to Snickers. So it can be done. It's just going to squeeze out maybe some other foods that you have. One of my favorite ways to get a chunk of that protein in one sitting, it doesn't even have to be a meal, it can be a snack, is either cottage cheese, and this brings me back to my grandmother with the cottage cheese and the pineapple and her pepper, right? Or plain, whatever fat content you want, Greek yogurt. So 1 cup of Greek yogurt, I know everyone has a different size hand, but if you go like this, that's about a cup. And if you don't believe me, go stick your hand in your measuring cup when you get home. Generally. So 1 cup of plain Greek yogurt has like 20 grams of protein. So that is a really quick, easy way to get a little boost. I know not everybody is friends with dairy, right? You're like, yep, nope. That is just one solution. There are a number of others. There's a number of protein lists that you can look at as well. But I like to use the Greek yogurt example because you can also then add what to it? Fruit. What kind of fruit? Yep, and frozen specifically. And I love adding the frozen to it because you just pull out what you need. You know, you don't have to always worry about getting the freshest and having it go to waste. And it's usually more expensive. But the natural sugars in fruit are great for you because fruit is great for you, not only because of the natural sugars, but also because of the other phytonutrients in there and the fiber. Alrighty. Any questions so far? Yes, ma'am. So she asked if the protein formula changed because you're more familiar with a lower amount, right? Yeah. Yep. So it is higher than what you may have read because what you may have read would be for someone who was under 50. Yep. So as we get older, we need more. Yep. It's a higher multiplication factor. Yep. Mm-hmm. And if you're wounded and older, then you need even more. Oh, yes. And if you're active and older, eat as much as you can that's comfortable. But make sure that you're eating a well-balanced diet. And by diet, I mean meal plan, not diet, but we'll get to that part as well. Any other questions? That was a good one. Okay. Speaking of protein and calories, there's also hydration. I asked this question aloud a couple of sessions ago, so I will ask you do not have to raise your hand, but think, am I thirsty right now? And if your answer is yes, you are already dehydrated. So your body has a feedback system, a feedback loop, that by the time your thirst craving has got to the brain, be like, feed me, drink me, you're already dehydrated. You need fluids. I really do need a sip of water. I was going to do this on purpose. So how much do we need to take in? What have we always heard? I feel like I'm ignoring this side. 6 to 8 ounce glasses a day, right? Do you guys follow that?
I drink more.
What? Half your weight in ounces. I think that could work. Yep. Do either of those work for folks? Do you pay attention to it? I've got the nurses, teachers pet up here. You drink? Okay, good. What's another way that you can tell if you are hydrated? I know some of you know the answer, you just want to say it. And as a dietitian, we are very comfortable talking about the ins and the outs. Yes, your urine's going to be very yellow. We all go to the bathroom. We all hopefully turn around and flush, and we're peeking. So If it's anything darker than like a light lemonade color, a light lemon juice color, then you need to drink more. And some research, not that I want you to use coffee as like your primary hydration source. You know, you can every other coffee with some other beverages. But some studies show that the fluid in the coffee will offset some of that from the urine production. But anyway, just a little tidbit for you. The general recommendation is for women like 2 to 3 liters of, we'll just say water a day. About 70% of that will come from liquids, but don't forget that a lot of our foods are wet as well. So what are some wet foods that can contribute to our hydration status? Everyone says watermelon first. Yes, and it is. It's delish. Good time, summertime. What else? All fruits, yeah. Oranges, your apples, your pears, your juice, your grapes, your cherries, all of those, definitely. Soups, stews, not that we'll be having stews right now, but yes, right? So all of those count. As long as you pay attention to the color of your urine and how you're feeling, then you're halfway there. I met someone who recently said that she keeps a set of dice by her refrigerator, and she starts obviously with one die, and every time she goes to her fridge, she'll pour out a cup of water from her pitcher, and then she'll turn the die each time she gets one. And so that's how she keeps track, which I thought that was kind of interesting. Just sharing what other people are doing, because you never know what works for somebody else. And I know one of the things as we get older, we don't want to drink too much water before we go to bed, right? I'm thinking we already know we're going to have to get up at least once during the night. So if it's twice, okay. You know, it's okay. It's okay. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is it better to not drink it all at once, but is it better to have like a big glass, or is it better to sip all day long?
I would say do what works for you. Yep. Obviously, you want to have it steady as much as you can during the day. I know somebody else who every time she goes to the bathroom, she'll drink a cup of water right there. And that's like a good way to pair a new behavior with a behavior that you are already practicing. So anytime you want to like make some changes, that's a technique that you can use, right?
They also claim that you can't use, the doctors used to say, you can't use coffee as your intake for water. It's got to be water plus.
You can include coffee in your hydration, but I wouldn't make it your primary. Yep. Yes. Okay. How many of you have found that you're interested in more sweet foods than you used to be or regularly? Is it more often?
Oh, I love sweets.
Me too.
Have that than a meal.
She'd rather have sweets than a meal. I feel you. And before we started, we were talking about sugar. And sugar and fat and ice cream, yeah, delicious. They have a very specific mouthfeel on the tongue. But so is, I'm just going to say like rice and beans. Also can be delicious. You know, insert your favorite savory entree here. They're different, but they're still good. Right? So it's really, I will say, unfair to compare broccoli to a pint of Ben & Jerry's, right? Flavor, like, they're different. Different is okay. But as we get older, we do start to favor more sweet foods. And so it's trying to find that balance of, yeah, you can still have the cookie, the ice cream, whatever. I just don't want folks to rely too much on, have too large of a portion or have it too often. I will leave that up to you as how much you think is, I mean, we know, right? We know if we're sitting there like, oh, am I full? But I keep eating it. Or the 7 p.m. like snack time. What am I going to have for sweets? Who's with me? I'm going to the fridge. We're looking for something tasty, right? So maybe you have vanilla ice cream and throw some fruit on top of that. Or maybe you have, instead of a whole pint, you have like a scoop. Because you know what? You know what it tastes like. It's going to taste the same the next time you have it too, so you don't have to have too much, right? The other issue is our taste buds change when we're on different medications or we might not feel like eating as much. And that's why it's really important to pay attention to whether you're having a meal or a snack, that they all, like, I don't want to say they all count, but they are as nutrient dense as they could be. And not 100%. I shouldn't have said all the time. Like 80-20, you know, the 80-20 rule, or 75-25. You want to make sure you have protein, you have a fruit or a vegetable in there, you have something with some dietary fiber, just to make sure you're getting all of your nutrients, and you're getting the biggest bang for your buck to prevent the malnutrition. So, for example, you know, the examples they use all the time are like peanut butter and crackers, or peanut butter and toast with raisins on it. The other day I had some Raisinets, and I think people who like love them or hate them, and the folks were like, oh my God, they're so disgusting. I love them. And I'm thinking, I'm eating fruit with my chocolate. So I was like, making out. Alrighty. Okay. So far, so good. Okay. Now I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about, so these are some of the things we need to keep track of, right? The protein, the calories, the hydration, considering the source where we're getting our nutrition information. We know that it's like straightforward. But right now we also know that prices, they're just going up and up and up. They always go up, right? They always go. When has food price come down? Anyone? No, right? Especially now, and we know eggs were a big thing with the production, and there was a virus and it killed a lot of the flock, and et cetera, transportation, logistics, et cetera. But one of the things that I encourage folks to consider is SNAP, and that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. And someday we will get to a point where we just call it SNAP and not have to say formerly known as food stamps, but it's like decades in the making. I don't think it's going to happen. So SNAP is something that we are all paying into. We've all paid into, just like you have with Social Security. And I know a lot of people think of food stamps back in the day when they were actually food coupons and coins, and thought that maybe it was for somebody else who needed it more than one does. And I'm going to encourage everyone who is interested in finding out a little bit more about SNAP. You can go online, or you can call Project Bread, or you can go to Outreach and say, hey, can you screen me for SNAP? Because you can get screened for SNAP, and then you can apply, and you can do it all online. And the minimum, there's so much I want to tell you about SNAP. I'm trying to go slow and make sure I hit all of my points here. The minimum amount that one would receive right now, it's now $22 a month. Not a lot, right? Doesn't sound like a lot. Not going to go very far. But you can roll it over. If I handed you a check for 12 months times $22, are you going to turn it down? No. And on top of that is the Healthy Incentives Program, which is a match for households of, so for a household of one, say, what's your name? Nina. So say Nina is going to apply. She only gets the $22 as a household of one, we're pretending. Then she would also get up to $40 in HIP funds, which are the funds that you can spend on fruits and vegetables. So you would really get $44 a month, every month. So that times 12, it's looking better, right? And I know that when you initially apply for SNAP, they want a lot of details, they want a lot of paperwork. Part of what they're doing is making sure that you're going to get the biggest benefit possible. They've made a couple changes around medical deductions. You can self-declare up to $190 of medical expenses a month. There's a whole bunch of ways that they're trying to make it easier. One of the things that I did, and like I said, with just like you're paying into Social Security, you've already paid in. You've already paid in. If you wouldn't turn down your Social Security, don't turn down SNAP. It comes on a plastic card now, so you just use it at the register like you would a credit card or your bank card. And did you know that as a SNAP recipient, that card also gives you cultural discounts? So you can get discounts on like museum entrances, different trips, all different kinds of things. I know, it's kind of cool. At the start of the pandemic, I took, at the time, I think it was $234. The maximum amount right now is $281, I think, a month. A couple years ago, it was 234. So I took that and I spent it on all SNAP approved foods. And I created this flyer. So this says SNAP Max 1 month many bags. So this is what one person would get, and it does not include the extra $40 that I could also spend. The HIP, that $40 does not roll over, so you have to use it each month. But if you look through the photos, like you can see how much it buys. This would be 1 month of food. You can also, I broke it down into stereotypical breakfast, lunch, and dinner meals, but also by food groups. Even if you receive the minimum amount and you're like, what am I going to be able to buy with that? You can buy pantry staples. You can buy your sugar, your flour, your olive oil. You can buy coffee. You can buy 70% dark chocolate, right? Which is good for your brain. So I would encourage folks to give it a second glance. If you have poo-pooed it in the past, you can buy frozen vegetables, stock up ahead of time.
So basically, you're saying we
Mm-hmm.
can go and do outreach and take this test.
Yeah. Yeah. You can go to outreach and say, will you screen me for SNAP? Yeah. And if anyone, I was
We
just,
have babies in California, believe it or not, I was with military, my husband. We got WIC. Things of butter,
cheese. Yep.
cheese,
Yep.
rather, and fruits and
Yep.
stuff. I was just one child, so I shared it with my neighbor.
Yep. So the WIC program is for women, infants, and children. And for anyone who's raising, so if there are any, kinship families, any grandparents raising grandchildren, if you have anyone in your household 5 and under, they qualify for WIC. So if you know of anyone who is, make sure that they take advantage of WIC as well. One of the things that I do in my role is every 6 months, I ask the Department of Transitional Assistance, who runs the SNAP program, what the average dollar amount is for SNAP for an older adult household of 1. So for single households, what's the average amount? Anybody want to guess what it is in Walpole right now? What the average dollar amount for SNAP, not including HIP. That's right. It's $212. That's the average for an older adult household of 1. So it's definitely worth checking out. Some folks won't be eligible. Some folks definitely will. Some will be in that weird gap, and that's why it's really important to go to outreach too, because you might be able to figure out how to make some adjustments. Okay, a little bit eye-opening, a little bit. Consider it. So you get the SNAP. Oh, and the HIP, you're automatically enrolled. Once you have SNAP, you automatically have HIP. You don't have to do anything else with it. Farmers markets, we know that those can sometimes be more expensive than if we were going to the grocery store. And the senior farmers market coupons increased in value this year from 25 to 50. I don't know if anybody knew that. There is a map of Massachusetts. It's called the Mass Grown Map. You can go on this website or have somebody do it for you, and have them search for, which farm stands or which local farmers markets will take either the SNAP program or the coupons. That is another resource available to you. And I listed on here that fresh isn't always best. Does anybody want to explain that to me?
To me, actually, if I buy blueberries, they go bad and I throw them out. I mean, I eat them, but they're too big. If I buy frozen, and it's fresh frozen, they last.
Exactly. Yep. So blueberries is the example. You buy them, they go bad really fast. It's basically throwing money away. Whereas if you buy it frozen, you can just use what you need. It lasts longer. And the example I always like to use is strawberries. So think of a strawberry in June in Massachusetts, locally grown, colorful, delicious, bright, juicy, versus a strawberry that we get in December. Grown from either Central or South America, shipped over on a cargo ship, on a tractor trailer, to the store, to your table. So the longer produce is exposed to light and air, the more nutrient loss will happen. So that's another reason why I love frozen fruits and vegetables. Yeah, there's a different texture. If you thaw them out, it's not the same, but a lot of times you'll get more of the nutrients in the frozen. And plus, you can buy the co-packed, buy the store brand. A lot of times it's the brand name that just is under the grocery store brand. I was going to say something else about that one. Oh, I know. The other thing was, regardless of what you're eating for, let's say you're not eating any fruits and vegetables at all, and you want to start. I don't care if it's fresh, frozen, canned, juiced, or dried. Doesn't matter to me. Remember, we all survived the 70s. We all ate a lot of canned fruits and vegetables, or a lot of canned vegetables, right? Probably just me. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. Canning is just a great food preservation practice. And if you're worried about the sodium and it's something you can rinse, just rinse it. You don't have to, spend the extra 25 to 50 cents to get the low sodium version. Just rinse it. Just rinse it. It's easy. Okay. All right. How we doing on time so far? You're zoning out? All right. This is the big one. So a lot of people, so I've been a dietitian for a couple of decades, and people always say, what about this fad? What about this fad? What about this nutrient? And I never chose a specific diet that I loved the most until I stumbled on the MIND diet. How many of you are familiar with the Mediterranean diet? Throw out some foods that are on the Mediterranean diet.
Beans, lentils,
Be-
garbanzo beans,
Beans, lentils,
plantains,
fish, olive oil. Yep. How many of you are familiar with the DASH diets? Yep, I know. They don't. Yeah, they don't. That one is not as popular anymore. It was the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. It was for if you had high blood pressure, and there were 2 steps. One was more restricted than the other. So a couple decades ago, some researchers at Rush University in Chicago combined components of the Mediterranean diet and components of the DASH diet, and they found that even for folks who didn't stick to this meal plan 100%, even if they stuck to it a little bit, it did decrease cognitive decline a little bit. So I'm not saying this is going to prevent Alzheimer's or other dementias, but eating from the MIND diet food groups has proven to slow cognitive delay. Cognitive delay. So the MIND diet foods. So this page that I gave you, the Brain Buddies, these are the food groups of the MIND diet. Stick this puppy on your fridge or in your pantry to remind you to eat more Brain Buddy foods.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel about the keto diet? And I don't mean that forever, but what I'm saying, it's not strict keto, but it's watching your sugars.
How do I feel about the keto diet? I think it's a fad. But if you want to watch how much sugar intake you take, absolutely. The problem with a lot of these diets is that they don't really teach you how to eat well or eat the right way. Yeah, and you will lose weight on a lot of the diets, but then it's keeping it off was the big thing. Yep. So you are welcome. We know all veggies, especially leafy greens. And remember how I was saying a cup? This is what we're talking about. Have a little mini salad once a day, right? Little spinach. Fruit, especially berries, definitely blueberries. Blueberries have shown to really have a positive effect on brain health. So buy those blueberries, fresh, frozen, or canned. If you want it in the compote, get the compote. Just know that you're having a little extra sugar. We know we're supposed to have whole grains, right? We know that one for extra fiber, extra B vitamins. Nuts and seeds. These are little calorie bombs, but they're delicious. And they have so many healthy fats, especially walnuts, which is an easy one to remember because it looks like a brain. And so you can add those to your little handful of spinach salad, right? You can have a few little, maybe the cran raisins with some spinach and some walnuts and your olive oil. Beans and lentils. You can buy the canned beans, no problem, just give them a rinse. And if you haven't regularly eaten beans or lentils, you can start by adding them into some dishes that you're already making. Or you can find some of those recipes that say sneaking the black beans into your brownies or other types of foods. There's ways to sneak them in to get used to having them. Herbs and spices. I keep doing this like it's news breaking, right? Guess which spice is really good for your brain? It's one of our favorites. Cinnamon. Yes, 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 yes. So maybe you want a little cinnamon in your coffee, which you can also have. Tea, coffee. So cinnamon and hot peppers. Dark chocolate, the number is 70% or higher. Try to go as high as that if you can, because that has, and it's not like to sit and have 2 candy bars a night, even though they're delicious, right? Have like an ounce of chocolate. Have a little piece. Have 2 ounces if you want. But you may have chocolate. You may have your chocolate. Your fish and seafood, you want the fatty foods, the fatty fish, the salmon, mackerel, herring, and sardines. And then poultry. So one of the ways I like to tie this all together is to think about a typical Thanksgiving meal. We have our poultry, typical, right? We will probably have a tossed salad, our leafy greens. We might have some of the walnuts in there or the craisins. Whole grains, we will maybe have whole grain rolls, maybe. We may have, I know, right? You're like, get a grip. I'm having my white dinner rolls, leave me alone. We might use whole grain bread for the stuffing. Maybe. We're going to have all different kinds of vegetables to go along with it. And we're going to have our tea and our coffee. And then we may have some apple pie or a fruit tart or something. So think of like Thanksgiving meal as my brain health food. As long as we're staying away from like a lot of the heavy pastries and the sweets and the butter and all of that other good stuff. Okay. Is this helpful? Yeah. Had you guys heard of this before?
Yes.
Has anybody but the nurse heard about this before? Okay. Awesome. See what you get for sitting in front? I liked it too. It's all good. Okay.
Cook for us.
I should cook for us. I should cook for myself. Yes. If you wanted to make sure you're going to get your whole grains, what to have on your grocery list. So I would give you 2 tips. The first one would be to definitely read the front of the package label to make sure that it says 100% whole grain, because a lot of times the bread manufacturers will add like a caramel coloring to it. So you're thinking, oh, it's darker, it must have more fiber in it, and it's a trick. Or they'll title it something different like 7 grains, and it doesn't have a lot of fiber. The other trick is turn it over and make sure that the serving size has at least 3 grams of fiber per serving fiber. Yep. That helps. Yep. Eating more, if you look for the dietary fiber comes from the outer part of the shell as well, and that's part of why we want the whole grain. Yep. So if you link your dietary fiber and your whole grains together, that will help. And that's the insoluble. That's the stuff that will move it through the alimentary canal. That is the word I mispronounced. I said elementary. I'm like, no.
Eat whole grains that bother you. I can't.
All of them? Have you tried all of the whole grains?
Probably not
Yep.
all of them, but I can't. It usually affects me.
Okay. Yep. If it's going to affect you, then get as close as you can without being uncomfortable. I can be delicate sometimes.
I'd rather have a piece of, and I don't eat bread that much, but I'd rather have a piece of bread than supper, white bread.
Right. I understand. Okay. So you said I should cook for you? Cooking for one? Raise your hand if it stinks. I know, it's not as fun as it was if we're cooking for a whole family, right? There's a website that I like. I'm glad they're adding more recipes to it, but it's called My Plate Kitchen. Remember back in the day, we had the 4 food groups, and then we had the My Pyramid, and now we have the plate. Well, this is the same USDA, My Plate Kitchen. You can do a search for, chicken, and the recipes will come out in a big list, and then you can filter those recipes by cuisine, by price, by the type of cooking equipment you have. Like you might only have a microwave and a range, and you can specify that, which I think is great. And then these recipes usually yield 2 or 20. So if you're having a big group, you can use it, or if you're just going to cook for one, and you can put the other portion in your fridge or freezer for later. I like the site. All right. And then I want to just finish with going back to what we were talking about around how nutrition is confusing and the science is always changing. But at the same point in time, just like from the 4 food groups to now, it's pretty straightforward. Right? We know we need to eat fruits and vegetables, not too much saturated fat, get our whole grains. So it's like sexy simple. And as I put this quote in here, I think most people have heard it before, but eat food, not too much, mostly plants, from Michael Pollan. Think about how you can move that needle toward that sentiment based on what you have, what your energy levels are. And as we move through aging in the years, I want to keep you vertical and I want to keep you as healthy as you possibly can be. So with that, hopefully you've learned 10 things. I didn't keep track. But if you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
What is your opinion about salt in your diet and how it's related to things like INR level and medications that might be furosemide? So you're trying to maintain a level, and all 3 of those things have an effect on your INR level, controlling your blood thickness.
I would, so the contraindications with the medicine, you mean? I,
Salt makes so much difference in the amount of liquid that you have in your body.
right, it does. And so there's 2 things. So it definitely, if there's more salt in your body, there's going to be more fluid. Folks who have high blood pressure, only about half of them are salt responsive. So sometimes it's hard to give like a global answer, but this is my answer. I would say we need to just be careful because a lot of the salt is in so many of the processed foods that we have. So we definitely need to read the labels. And salt is a great thing. It's preservation. It makes the food taste different, better, etc. But we definitely need to be cognizant, especially if it's a disease state that we're watching, just like we would if we were paying attention to like our glucose or our A1C levels. And you had a question.
Well, I was going to ask you, could you comment on the amount of salt you think?
The recommended amount is 2,400 milligrams a day. And my guess is that most of us meet or exceed that level. What you don't need to do is to go out and buy all of the different types of fancy salts because salt is salt. Some say that there's a little bit more flavor in this salt or that salt. If you can taste it, have at it, but you don't need to pay for the fancy salt. A lot of times, like the kosher salt, it has larger surface area in the grain, so it's going to taste saltier. Oh yeah, if you're going to go with the canned, like they use sodium for canning, period. And jars, like your tomato sauce, just like there's a bunch of sugar in tomato sauce as well. Yes. You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Just in my mind. How do you feel about organic? How do you feel about it? I personally can tell you.
Yep.
I think it's a gimmick.
So the question is, how do I feel about organic? So organic, I don't think it's a gimmick. It's really about taking care of the land. It's about, right? So if you think, it depends on which way you look at it from. So if you can afford and prefer to buy organic because you are concerned about the food system and decreased use of pesticides and herbicides, definitely. But if you are on a tight budget and you cannot afford organic, but you still want those strawberries, but there's like a $2 or $3 difference, just buy the strawberries that you can have, because I would rather folks, and specifically we're talking about fruits and vegetables, buy what you can afford. There's no judgment in that. Yeah. But there are, and that's the other thing too, drives me nuts. So there's some studies that show that there's more nutrients in organic, and there's other studies that show that there aren't. So, yeah. You guys have good questions. Yes, ma'am.
I've never been one to try all different kinds of diets, but my daughter sent me the Mind Diet
Oh,
book, and Dr. Rowe and her research, and also the recipes in the back that were made, that put together by her daughter, who I believe is a nutritionist. And so I decided to try it, and I went probably 3 months on it. I lost 15 pounds, and I definitely had a much sharper brain.
Oh, okay. So she said she tried the Mind Diet, lost 15 pounds, and felt sharper mentally. That's great. And there are other versions of the Mind Diet too, like the Alzheimer's Association has one. There's the Brain Health and Wellness Preservation. I'm blanking on the correct organization, but they're local. It's out of Acton. They have recipes on there as well, all around brain health.
I wanted to do this was because my mom died of vascular dementia. 3 of her sisters did as well, and now my sister is in a facility.
Yeah.
So really helped me to feel that
Maybe you have a little control over, a little prevention. Yeah, and the other thing, I'll end with this, is that the Mind Diet, a lot of these foods are what we see often in a lot of the other like healthy heart diets and other diets that are good for us. So it's going to have more than just the brain benefit.
The Mediterranean diet, the Italians, we were brought up on that.
Mhm.
Lentils, the beans,
Yep, it's a combination of the two.
olive oil
Yep.
and stuff. Not so much pasta.
All right. Thank you guys very much. I will end here. Yes. And I hope this was helpful and entertaining. And I do see a cookie left over there, so I'll race you.